Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. There's been a whole bunch of talk over the last several years about the grand lie, the big lie that has been told, and the number of lies that have been told. And the problem with when somebody tells a lie, nobody knows what the truth is. The truth doesn't overcome the lie. It just reaches the point where nobody knows who to trust. And isn't that where we are now? Nobody knows who to trust. So today I wanted to talk about truth and the grand lie and apply it to the Iraq Genocide, because the conflict, the Iraq War, was not a war. Actually, it devolved as a genocide. And so now we are at the next level of it, so to speak. We're actually on the third level of it. That was the first level of the grand lie. And then the ripples of effects have gone out, and it's affecting everybody on the planet. So we have a global genocide that's devolving. So what I wanted to do today was talk about about the truth, and about how to know the truth, and then how to start to build trust again. Okay, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience on this. I was a dental hygienist who got squeezed out of my job when my daughter was born. I took time off, and my boss hired somebody else to replace me for a while. And then I ended up working just part-time, and then I was squeezed out of my job. I was okay with that. I had started my nonprofit organization. I had books that I had channeled, and I was ready to make a change. So I'm not blaming anybody for what happened. Everything happened just fine as far as I was concerned. But that still put me in a very difficult situation because I had no sorts of income. Okay, so my daughter and I ended up homeless for a while. Now, homelessness is no different than any other situation. So I'm going to talk about that for just a minute. Okay, speaking from my own personal experience. Okay, when we all, and I've talked about this before, when we go along for a period of time, most of our lives, for some of us, but some of us are younger when this happens. But when you reach the point where you basically go into the abyss, when you get squeezed out of your job, then you go into the abyss, because if you can't find another job, the circumstances are that you can't find another job. So you have to figure out how you can survive. Okay? As a homeless person, it was very difficult for me to do that. Okay, and it's taken a long time for me to go through this cycle where you climb out of the abyss. And I've been climbing out of the abyss for a long time. And so this is something that it's the same process for everyone who goes into a crisis situation. Donald Trump, for example, has been going along for a period of time, working as a businessman, a New York businessman, buying real estate, doing very, very well. And now he's hitting the legal ramifications of it, which many New York businessmen do, go down into the abyss. How far down is he going to go? How is he going to respond to it? Okay, so then how does he come out of his abyss again? It's the same. If you have diabetes, how do you get out of it? Because if you can't get out of it, at that point in time, you feel you can't get your life, and that's when you die. So what we are going to do is we see, how about people with the pandemic? How about people with heart disease, diabetes, cancer? All these people have been going the same process. So we're looking at the process and how to get out of it. All right, that's not the topic for today. We're talking about truth and how to get out of it, how to resolve this issue about the grand lie. Okay, so we're going to look at something here. Most people, in my letter to the Supreme Court, I explained I explained. So I'm speaking from my own personal experience here, okay, about how to get out of the crisis. When and my books go into it in far greater depth, and I'm not an expert. I'm still a student just like everybody else. So I'm going to let God handle my spiritual guides. I'm a psychic, and that's how I channeled books. For me to get out of my crisis, I have to help other people get out of their crisis. So that explains a lot. Now, I'm going to tell you something here. Okay, in my letter to the Supreme Court, which I also channeled, basically it says there's a misunderstanding in our minds. Misunderstanding, and we live in the third dimension, which is called the illusion. So let's just assume there are lots of misunderstandings out there and start to unravel them so we can start making our own progress, how the entire planet can come out of this crisis, because we have existential threats going on, like a global genocide that started as a result of the Iraq War. I'll get into that later. Okay, but this is what I wanted to talk about now. We're talking about 3 levels of the universe, but most people only see 2. They don't see that there's a 3rd level here. They only react to crises by looking at this and this. Okay, and an example of this is like, let's say that you have the 3 levels in science are known as the potential, the drive, and the plan. Okay, in religion, it's the Father, the Mother, and the Son. In the U.S. government, it's constitutional law, federal law, and maybe state law, the application of these ideas. Okay, or no, actually, it would be universal law, constitutional law, and federal law. Okay, so now we've got all of these ideas because this is the application of this and this. But when you only see this is like the father. Let's say in a classic traditional family, you have the father who pegs the family on a particular socioeconomic level. The mother, who basically is the application of that. Is she going to be a stay-at-home mom? Is she going to be a working mom? Is she going to be a helpmate to her husband? What is she going to do? How is this going to work, father, mother, and son? And then you have the children. So each time you have, let's say, a working dad who works 80 hours a week, a mom who's basically out gallivanting all over, maybe even doing charity work, and then the kids come home and they're latchkey kids, and they have no guidance between the two. Okay, so, or how about a divorced family where there's no father, there's only a mother, and there's only the child? Okay, what happens if the family has driven the father out? Or kind of like you see in a lot of family shows, the mother is gone and you only have the father and the child, and the father and the child are trying to deal with this crisis. So you see, if there's only one adult and the child, it causes a lot of problems because each has a role to play in how the child is raised. So we're looking at all of these ideas. Now, regarding the 3 levels of the universe related to truth, and okay, what we're looking at truth, and we're going to look at truth as the principles of the truth, okay? These are the principles. This is the application, which is the power, principles, power, and project, okay? So, if you have a grand lie situation, we have the truth, okay? We can look at that as the overall truth that cannot be denied. Okay, then we have the truth, and the application of that is, if let's say that you have a situation where with the Iraq War, we had the truth, and let's say the body of intelligence that was coming out. The intelligence community was gathering information, but it wasn't necessarily the truth, but they had to verify it. they had to go along and verify information before, let's say, before something a prosecutor can take it to court. They have to create a case that they believe will win. So they have to kind of like take care of all the details. If there's one thing that's not fitting in, then they have to go figure out why it doesn't fit in. Same thing with science. Let's say that you have a body of knowledge related to science, and there's certain things that don't fit into the plan. Okay, so we have the truth, which is the whole truth body of knowledge, but it's also not necessarily complete. So it can be what happens if you don't have the complete, but you do have the complete idea. So it pegs it on a certain level, that body of knowledge. Then what you do to apply it, and this is the plan that comes out from it. So under George W. Bush, he had a certain body of knowledge, the intelligence community, the CIA, all of the people who came together. Then he basically filtered out this and decided he put his own ideas into it. And basically what he did was he wove an illusion, and that turned into the preemptive strike on Iraq. He took this body of knowledge and he filtered through what he wanted to understand, and then he got revenge on Saddam Hussein. He brought together, and what set the stage for this was the Gulf War. Okay, so this, instead of taking this body of knowledge, let's say a president who sits very high in the regard, takes the body of knowledge, applies it in such a way that benefits everyone, and the plan is something that will move everybody forward in their progress. Now, I don't know all the particulars, but let's say that the situation was, the truth that was coming out was the amount of slavery that was in the world. In the United States, left over from the debate on slavery and writing the Constitution. Were our founding, or the Declaration of Independence, if our founding fathers had a situation where they wanted to declare the Declaration of Independence, that all people are created equal, what were they going to do about the slaves that they had? Were they going to emancipate the slaves at that time? No, because what happened is they had to make a compromise to make the Declaration of Independence go forward. Otherwise, they were not going to be able to make it happen. They had to wait 100 years for Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, to come out. They hadn't even gotten the first president, and they had to wait till the 16th president to come up with the Emancipation Proclamation. And then it was like this evolutionary process that it took. In fact, there's still slaves today, not necessarily based on the idea of revenge and the application of this. So we're looking at truth, and we're looking at this, and we're looking at this, and we're looking at this. Okay, so how do we, if the world was going along saying, okay, preemptive strikes, we're going to topple regimes that we don't like, and all of a sudden there were no weapons of mass destruction, by going after that, George Bush put the United States into the abyss. And that allowed the other countries like Russia and Putin and China to start moving in. And also ISIS was coming from, and that's another story about this idea. So we have all of these world leaders jockeying for power to see who would be the next superpower. The Republicans didn't believe it. Okay, so let's say the Republicans now are saying, how about voters? So we're going to get rid of the truth. We're going to look at this level and this level. We're going to take what we have, and we're going to do it in our own best interests, and then we are going to have voter suppression laws. Okay, so that's what it is. They're looking at this, and they're not looking at this. They're pegging, by leaving this out, they're like leaving the father out who pegs the family, and now the mother is responsible for all taking care of the kids. Okay, so now how do we solve this problem? How do you know the truth? Okay, so our founding fathers, going back to that again, said, We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Okay, endowed by our Creator. Endowed by our Creator. So the Creator of us all. Universal law stands on these 7 principles that we've talked about this before. Equality, liberty, freedom, compassion, abundance, capacity, and tolerance. Okay? See? Equality, liberty, freedom, compassion, abundance, capacity, and tolerance. And what that does is it creates a sense of balance again that allows everybody to move forward. So let's say that we have a father who is standing on these principles of universal law, and he's a spiritual man, not necessarily a Christian man, not necessarily a Muslim, but is standing on these principles because universal law, religion, and Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, all these are here, not here when it comes to universal law. They're applications of universal law. Okay, here, religion and one of the religions. So what we have is this cannot tell God what to do. This cannot tell this what to do. This is the application of it. Okay. So now what we can do is we can understand when somebody tells a lie, says, okay, what's the lie going out? Donald Trump standing and inciting people to violence. Okay, is that something? So all the insurrectionists are running around going, there's a revolution going on here now. We're going to start shooting people. We're going to start killing people who are not. If you're not for Trump, you're a traitor to your country. We're going to hang. All these things. We're going to hang these people, members of Congress. We're going to do all these things. No, basically, what happens is that is saying. So Donald Trump told the grand lie, the big lie. And this is the outcome of it, is, let's say, the insurrection. By inciting people to violence, he's not standing on the truth. And the truth is he decided, let's say, this is the government and how the government functions. And then he decided he was going to run it like a business. He announced he was going to run it like a business, and because of that, he incited people to violence. He was going to say, I have a fixer. The Bill Barr is my fixer. I have everybody, the Department of Justice are my fixers, and I'm going to put in somebody here. I have the right, the Constitution gives me the right to do this, but we're talking about principles here and the application of the principles. So what is the application of the principles? What pegs our country on a very high level? Well, for one thing, equality under the law. For a fair trial, there must be, the first requirement is that everybody has to be considered equal. So we're going to talk about anarchy. So if we have kangaroo courts where it's rubber stamped, okay, I'm a Trump judge and I'm going to do what Trump wants rather than what the Constitution wants. I'm supposed to, my oath of office is to Constitution, not to the individual. So we're looking at all these ideas now. So who do you trust? Who do you trust? That's the first question, is who do you trust? Okay, do you trust Donald Trump, who is not looking at this? He declared that he was going to run the business like the government like a business. I'm a businessman. I can fire whomever I want, including the head of the FBI. Okay, technically he can, but that is not based on this idea. That is undermining the idea of government based on these principles. So when our government is based on, say we're talking about this and we're talking about this, we're talking about these principles, then this allows everybody to move forward. These principles allows everybody to move forward. We have equality. We have liberty. Liberty are our unalienable rights, our constitutional rights. Liberty, universal law, our unalienable rights, our constitutional rights, our federal and state rights, okay, to hold elections, okay? But what happens if Donald Trump says, I want you to overturn that election, and he sends people in? I have the right to do this because that's tyranny when something is coming up and he is unstoppable. Okay, freedom. Now, how about if we take a look at the First Amendment rights and as opposed to the Second Amendment rights? So we have the press, our amendment, we have the media, and what are they teaching? You have PBS, for example, who basically goes out, reports the news, and they don't put a spin on it. No spin. You have the media. You have Fox News as opposed to PBS, as opposed to the OAN news, as opposed to CNN. Okay, is this, when you call them fake news, that is breaking the First Amendment of the Constitution, because the press has to be able to report the news, and they cannot put, technically PBS is doing a really good job at reporting the news and without putting spin on it. Okay, so now what's happening is that you have like a battle going on between the two, but how can you say that PBS is bad? You see, PBS, nobody questions PBS because it's a public broadcasting and it's paid by, they're supported by everybody. It's not somebody with an agenda. It's their agenda, so to speak, is to publish the news. And they are supported by everybody. To keep their support, they have to just let anybody who support it. Okay, so it is not like a nonprofit organization that is functioning on a very high level. Okay, so the news, it's functioning here on a very, very high level. They're not lying. They're not spinning the truth. They have no agenda other than to report the news. And because of that, they're immune from anything that's going on here. Okay, but what happens here is when you remove the principles and you just look at this and this, that's when you run into trouble. Now, you go along for a period of time. Fox News went along for a period of time reporting the news, and then when Donald Trump got in, then it went down into the games. Okay, it always had some spin, but basically when they started to get accused of sexual assault and things like that, then they left, and okay, they resigned, that was okay. Then what happened is when Donald Trump got in and they started to put the spin on it, well, we're going to do this, that all of a sudden they became part of his agenda, part of his plan. Okay, so let's just say this can either be George Bush or this can be Donald Trump. So now, you know what the truth is based on this idea. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. We know that when an election is based on voter suppression, and the only way that we can win this election is by cheating. We'll never win if we don't cheat. Okay? Okay, so now tell you what, if you took that idea, that mindset to Las Vegas, okay, what do you think would happen to that mindset if you took that to Las Vegas? And you're being arrested in the casino and they're saying, we can't win unless we cheat. Okay, that isn't going to work. Okay, and what happens there stays in Las Vegas. No, that doesn't work. Okay, so now we're looking at this idea. So you can recognize this happening when it doesn't treat everybody fairly and equally, denying people their rights, their liberty. Their liberty is people who have been dragged into a genocide lose their It's right here. Genocide. You can look at that. Okay, so this is the genocide right here, the word genocide. And then liberty is where the principle that stops a genocide are unalienable rights. So to stop the genocide, a genocide is different from a war. A genocide is basically like a character defamation campaign. Let's say you have two neighbors, and one of them, let's say they have a tree on the near the property line, and it's dropping stuff on leaves and such on the other guy's property. If you're a good neighbor, you can go clean it up and say, okay, hey Charlie, I'm sorry about this, but this tree has been around for a long time, and it's really nice to sit under it in the summertime when it's so hot. Okay, we can sit out here and drink. Hey, let's go sit and drink lemonade together, or have a beer underneath it. Okay, and we'll appreciate it. Okay, then I'll clean this up later. Okay, that is let's say a good neighbor, because they're both equal. They can both work on it together. He said, oh, don't worry, I'll clean up myself. Okay, I don't worry about that. I can just clean that up. Okay, in exchange for the beer, sure. Okay, now what happens if there's damage? Then it has to go to court. But both neighbors are equal. They both have their property rights under the law. That is, if it's a battle in court, that's kind of like a war going on. Okay, a genocide is when one person is defaming the other. And even Moses talked about that in the 10 Commandments. He said, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not lie. Because that is what creates a genocide. It takes away people's rights. Now, this is what's happening now because of the grand lie that's been told. A grand lie, when there's illusion, there's two power games that are based on weaving an illusion. One of them is slavery, and the other one is human rights violations, and that has to do with taking away somebody's money and power, and it's like weaving an illusion like that. How about sexual assault is like, I own you and I will push you away. How about serial killers? I will enslave you and then I will kill you. I will hold on to you and then I will kill you. That's how serial killers think. That's the mentality of a serial killer. Okay, so that has to do with compassion. Okay, we'll go into that later. Okay, but there are two. So the other one is taking away people's rights, and that's what happened in Iraq. Is that people didn't have the right for their rights to live their life without interference, to be treated fairly and equally, and to have a voice in their government. We're going to topple your government because that guy is really mean. Okay, that doesn't work. They have the right to choose their own government. They have the right to live in peace without having a coalition of countries coming in and telling it, we're going to topple your government, and if you don't like it, we're going to shoot you because you're not going along with us. Okay, see where we run into problems here. Okay, all those people were in it for the money. We own you because we have a bigger military than you do. And then basically all right, that didn't work, did it? Okay, so now the U.S. government went along thinking regime change. We can topple people together, natural resources, and we can get there, and then their strategic locations. We're going to have the world's biggest. Okay, so let's get together. I'm an oil man. I can do this. And then what happens is this, and then we went into the abyss. By taking away the unalienable rights of the Iraqi people, in the United States, we're losing ours. By toppling another government, and that when there were no weapons of mass destruction, he was innocent. Saddam Hussein was innocent, and that means that we are now being toppled by other governments that are coming in, like ISIS, and that's why Donald Trump put the ban on the border for Muslims to come in, and they were already here. So how are we going to do it? Kill all the Muslims? No, how about we just treat everybody fairly and equally? And equality is the principle that Muslims stand on. So if they're saying we have the right to be treated fairly and equally, and you say, yeah, you're right, so let's make sure that everybody gets treated fairly and equally, we made a mistake. We were listening to the grand lie, and then we believed the lie, and then we perpetrated genocide. All those soldiers, U.S. soldiers, were dragged into this genocide. They thought that they were defending the United States, and they believed a lie. So now what we have is this big, huge crisis because the ripples have gone out and people are in crisis and all those people got killed and we have to wade through the mess. So now to come out of that, we have to stop playing the games. If you're an alcoholic, you have to stop drinking alcohol before you can rebuild your life again. And now we have to stop playing the games. We cannot go down any further. And now it's time to look at this, and it's time for us to start coming out of our crisis. And to come out of our crisis, we have to start making win-win agreements. That's how we build trust. Nobody trusts us. We have to start making win-win agreements. Win-win agreements build trust and set the stage for future agreements. So now we have to come up in America, we have to come up with a plan that benefits everyone. And we can no longer play the games. We can no longer play the games because the anger that's associated with this, Joe Biden is starting to face this a little bit, isn't he? There's so much anger against our government, and it's because people believe the lie. And it's not that our government, the Democrats do a pretty good job, but they're not completely based on all of this idea because our foreign policy still isn't very good. So we have to start to unravel all of these issues as we come out of the abyss. We have to start unraveling each one of these misunderstandings that's causing problems. So now my intent for today is to look at the 3 levels of the universe, basically, and understand that if you leave the dad out and he's no longer there and it's just a mom who just tries to work every day and works 2 shifts and the child is basically has no guidance, has nothing. Basically, together the mother and the father set the rules for this generation. So what rules did they set for this generation? Okay, the next generation. So all of these ideas are coming out and they have to be addressed. To come out, we have to start unraveling all these misunderstandings, and then we have to start rebuilding and undoing the damage we've done. This is like a 12-step program. This is like a 12-step program that we have to go through. An alcoholic falls into the abyss. How low is he going to go, or she going to go? Is somebody going to come? Are they going to say, God, help me, I've messed up my life. Okay, I need help. And then somebody can come in and step in and go like this and help them out by joining, like say, Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, so now what we are doing is we are in our organization, we understand this idea and we are going to help everybody get not only back to square one, we want to get everybody to the point where they're creating the life they've always wanted. Because we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, getting the life you've always wanted, liberty, our freedoms, our unalienable rights, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so we have the right to create the life we want, to be treated fairly and equally, and to have a voice in our government. Because our government, basically, so what can we do? We can allow everybody, by working to create this international government, we are allowing everybody to have their unalienable rights that they're being denied by governments that are basically oppressive to the people. Okay, so we became just like a third world country. We're functioning under George W. Bush. We broke that idea But it was going on that way for a period of time. Then we became like a third world country with despotic leadership. But even though George Bush is a very nice man, a very good man, he said a Christian man, but he basically just wasn't functioning based on God's law. A Christian man not standing on the principles of universal law. But we're going to unravel this illusion, and now we can apply the same information to Donald Trump and the lies that he told. Okay, so the press is important. The media is important because they're going to catch people on the lies. They keep records of everything, and the records are going to show, okay, in March of this last year, you said this. I have a direct quote here, and you said this. Okay, what did you mean by that, and are you standing on those principles of it? The First Amendment is the freedom of the press, the freedom to come together without having the government put you down. Okay, we have the right to peacefully protest. We don't have the right to break the laws. You don't have the right. You have the right. In fact, for the civil rights, the black people would come together. They would wear their suits. They would come to and dresses. They would come together. They would link arms, and then they would walk. They would walk and they would march. This was not, I'm going to break all these windows. I'm going to start fires. Okay, so if there is a protest, let's make it so that we are linking arms and walking forward so that people are not going to interfere. Because we have the right, the unalienable right, to have a voice in our government. And it's more than just voting. It's also being able to protest. And all of these things we talk about in the books that are associated with our government proposals. Okay, it unravels this mess that we're going in. My books that I channeled start to unravel the mess. So let's say the first set of books have to do with the Iraq War, how it happened, why it's a genocide. And it's not so much that, it just now. So we've come together, speaking from our own personal experience. We are coming out of this abyss and unraveling all this illusion, all the misunderstandings. Why would, so the Republican Party said, we don't want this. We want to be able to take this idea. It's like the letter of the law as opposed to the intent of the law. We have the right to do this. The Constitution gives us the right to do this. Does the Constitution give them the right to do that? And that is the letter of the law versus the intent of the law. It's the idea. My first father-in-law was an attorney, a retired attorney. And one time I said to him, well, isn't that illegal? And he looked at me and he said, oh, I was like 20 some years old. I just was in college. And he said, did you know legal? Yeah, it was legal, but it wasn't lawful. He said, do you know the difference between legal and lawful? No. So a lot of people who don't know the difference between legal and lawful are saying it's legal, and they're saying the letter of the law as opposed to the intent of the law. So something can be done legally, but it isn't necessarily lawful. Okay, so in other words, let's say if you do something legally, that means that, let's say that you are going to write a will. Okay, but it might not be a lawful will. How about a document? Congress can write let's say the voter suppression laws are legal because Congress is doing it, but they're not lawful because they can be overturned because they're not standing on the principles of what they're doing. So now, if you are standing up in protest, are you going to understand the difference between writing something legally, a law legally, as opposed to lawfully? Okay, so understand that there's all these misunderstandings that the average person doesn't necessarily know, and that's what makes you susceptible to the grand lie. If you've done nothing but watch, if you're a Trump supporter and you've done nothing but watch Fox News, are you going to believe Donald Trump to the point where you believe that what you are doing is legal? But it actually isn't lawful, because 545 people believe that what they were doing was legal because they were listening to the president, but it wasn't lawful. Okay, so all these misunderstandings. The President of the United States asked us to come here and do this. See what I mean? It was legal from the standpoint of, based on the idea of it was legal because they felt the president. They believed it was legal, but it wasn't. So legal, was it legal, lawful, or down here? So was this, see what I mean? So now, I'm going to just go back for just a minute and say, the Iraq War, when George W. Bush invaded Iraq, there were a whole bunch of protesters who were standing up, and they were just totally disregarded. All around the world, people were protesting. Why were they protesting? Why were they protesting? George W. Bush had an over 80% approval rating. Hey, I've got an 80% approval rating. And basically, by that time, the Senate and the Congress, it's up to the Congress to approve war. It's up to the House of Representatives. Is it the will of the people to do that? Now, I'm just kind of unraveling things. So he had 80% approval rating. I've got an 80% approval rating for this. Okay, but what about the other 20%? What were they saying? Why were they disregarded? Okay, why was this under the table? And that's because they understood this idea, that Iraq is a sovereign country, that Iraq had the right to have their own government, that they understood the rights of the people of Iraq to live their life without interference, that there were no weapons of mass destruction. They knew the truth. So if you can come up with a plan that nobody is protesting about, then it'll go forward. If it treats everybody based on these ideas, if legislation is a plan and it's based on these ideas, on these principles, then it'll go forward. Except if people are basing their own financial support on the existing structure, their security and support on the existing structure, and then you have to figure out how to convince them. If they are like this, if you are a Republican now, like Mitch McConnell, saying, we have the constitutional right to do this, the Constitution gives us a right, we are standing on the Constitution. The Constitution addresses the use of power and the abuse of power. If you look at power, the Constitution, the application of that, this is the principles, this is the power, and this is the project, which means you can use power based on these principles. If you stand on the principles, if you have a woman, a wife, who stands on the principles of her husband, and he's standing on a very high level, you can bring him up to a higher level, or you can drag him down, or you can just not pay any attention to it, not solve problems for him. Okay, so let's say that you just stay in bed all day and eat candy, watch Fox News, okay? Okay? So now, that's all I wanted to talk about today, is understanding this. We're going to look at the Iraq Genocide and how it evolved and why it evolved based on the abuse of presidential power. George W. Bush was not standing on the principles, but I don't want to go into this in great detail. I just wanted to use this as an example because there's going to be a court case, and I don't want to. Maybe George Bush needs to look at this and understand basically why he got into trouble. So maybe that's okay to talk about this in the court case. I don't want to influence the outcome of the court case. Okay, so now that's all I wanted to say today. the truth and understanding where the truth is. If you have the principles, if these are the principles you stand on, you basically will function on a very high level. If your principles are non-existent, they're totally not part of your life. Let's say this idea, the kid's growing up without any principles. And now, that's a whole nother story, is what happens if the kids have higher principles than you do. Okay, because basically that's something we'll go into in another video. Okay, that's all I wanted to say today. I ask that you like, share, and subscribe, but mostly share with your family and friends, because this information is important. Okay, this information helps to unravel the mess our world is in. Okay, I'm going to just keep on going whether or not you share. I'm going to keep sharing information. I have my books, and I'm going to start sharing them with people who are willing to listen. So, basically, right now I can only sell them to independent members of my organization, and that is part of our exit strategy for Iraq planning. If you go on our website at oneworldgov.org, you can see the planning for it. And I'm going through it. I came up with the planning steps several years ago, and now I'm going to go through step by step and rework them just a little bit, and then we'll be ready to do that. Our first idea, and I'll go into the next one as soon as I finish this, but then I have to turn it over to somebody else, the next one over. I can start and introduce the information, but then I can only do so much. Then I have to turn it over to the next person, and I'm going to be working on the Iraq War and the genocide and the grand lie and the truth, and then that individual will be working on unalienable rights and the constitutional amendment idea. And the reason for that is my organization cannot lobby Congress. We cannot lobby. We can go up and say as citizens that, this is it, but then we can't put them into the situation where they have to support it. Okay? I can advise them on how to get out of a crisis, but I can't lobby them. So it has to be somebody else who has the lawful right to do that. Okay, so my job will be here, and then I'll just kind of work with each of the groups of people. So it won't be long before somebody else is sitting here in this chair, or maybe another chair, and explaining to you about these ideas. Okay? So then you'll know that we're going to be taking the next step. The character defamation campaign against me is going to, and the organization, because we're such a threat to the existing structure that there's resistance to the idea. I'm standing on these principles, but when you come up with a plan, the first stage of it, the first step is that you get blasted by people whose security and support is threatened. And that's why this is called Armageddon. And that is two people sitting in a field. One goes up, stands on the principles, and the other one responds by going down into the games. And when Barack Obama introduced a plan for world peace in 2000, and open debate in Congress amongst the people and the ambassadors, because the ambassadors were coming to him and saying, we like this idea, then it threatened the security and support of people who were trying to do a hostile takeover of the world. And then so he got blasted too. Obama got blasted, and that's why Donald Trump is blasting him. Okay, and swore that he would work to undo everything he had done. So now what we have is we have a battle standing on the principles of, we have the constitutional, our job is to do this, our job is to do this. So they're looking at this idea. Anyway, I could talk about this all day long and just kind of never convince anybody anything. So as long as this is out, I ask you to like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk about all this stuff in future videos. Thanks for stopping by.